The gilded horizon did not simply travel through the stars, it presided over them. The flagship dreadnought of the Tri-Consortium was a marvel of excess, a city wrapped in hull plating that cost more than the planetary GDP of most colony worlds. Tonight, the stars themselves were merely the carpet beneath the guests' feet. The main ballroom was a glass-bellied sphere suspended from the ship's underbelly, offering a terrifying and magnificent view of the obsidian void and the burning nebulas of the Kestrel sector. Light from distant suns filtered up through the transparency, catching on the hems of crushed diamond gowns and the polished metals of mercenary captains. Lysara Vane stood near the center of the room, a statue of impossible grace. She wore a dress of liquid silver that moved a second after she did, clinging to her form like a second skin, designed to display her husband's wealth rather than her own taste. She smiled. It was a practiced expression, one she had rehearsed in the mirror until her facial muscles ached. She was perfect, quiet, and watched. At her side stood Kale Draven. The most feared shipowner in the Tri-Consortium looked nothing like a monster. He was elegant, his skin the color of pale slate, his eyes a sharp, arresting violet. He held a glass of blue nectar in one hand and rested the other possessively on the small of Lysara's back. To the casual observer, it was a gesture of affection. To Lysara, it was a shackle. Kale laughed at a joke made by a bloated senator from the mining guild. The sound was rich and charming, devoid of the cold calculation that Lysara saw when the doors to their private suite closed. "And this is my newest acquisition," the senator rumbled, gesturing to a massive holographic map floating above the buffet. "The Hyperlane Bypass. It cuts shipping time by 30%. Kyle nodded, his fingers tightening imperceptibly on Lysara's spine. "Efficiency is the currency of the future, Senator," Kale said smoothly. "Time is the one commodity we cannot manufacture, though my wife would argue that beauty is equally valuable. Isn't that right? Lysara?" Lysara turned her head, the silver fabric of her collar shimmering. "Beauty is only valuable if it is maintained." "My lord," she said, her voice soft and melodious, exactly as her etiquette tutors had instructed. Kale beamed, displaying her obedience like a prized jewel. The surrounding magnates murmured their approval. They saw a happy union, a merger of old noble blood and new industrial power. They did not see the security detail posted at every exit, their eyes scanning not for assassins, but for any sign that the lady of the ship might step out of line. They did not know that her biometric signature was locked out of the flight decks, the communication arrays, and even the external airlocks. Lysara was the queen of the gilded horizon, and she was the only prisoner on board who had to wear a crown. "Excuse me," she murmured, offering a fragile apology to the circle of power brokers. "The gravity stabilizers are making me slightly dizzy. I need a moment of air." "Do not wander far, my dear," Kyle said. His violet eyes did not smile. "We have a toast in 20 minutes. I want you by my side, always," she whispered. She walked away, feeling the weight of his gaze on her shoulder blades until she turned the corner behind a pillar of water-sculpted ice. The moment she was out of sight, her posture collapsed. The perfect smile vanished, replaced by a look of exhaustion that bordered on despair. She tapped the discreet comms earpiece hidden beneath her hair. "Vivi, tell me there is somewhere on this ship where I cannot be seen." The voice of the ship's artificial intelligence concierge chimed in her ear, bright, chipper, and utterly devoid of soul. "Good evening, Mistress Lysara. Based on current sensor density and guest distribution, the only unmonitored location is the waste recycling outflow valve on Deck 42. However, I must advise against it. The aroma would stick to your molecular structure for 3 weeks. Might I suggest the powder room? I can dim the lights and play soothing oceanic sounds to optimize your emotional regulation. I do not need oceanic sounds. Vivi, I need an exit. Optimizing wife-husband compatibility requires low stress levels. Vivi chirped. Perhaps you should review the module on gratitude for stability. Master Kale has provided you with a life expectancy 40% higher than the galactic average. Smile. Your cortisol levels are spiking and that causes wrinkles. Lysara suppressed the urge to scream. She turned down a service corridor, ignoring the do not enter sign. The heavy bass of the gala music faded, replaced by the hum of the ship's massive engines. She needed silence. She needed to pretend, just for a moment, that she was not a breathing ornament. She found a shadowed alcove near the ventilation shafts of the cargo logistics sector. It was unglamorous, smelling of recycled ozone and lubricant, but it was empty. She leaned her head against the cool metal wall and closed her eyes. Voices drifted through the grate above her head. They were low, clipped, and serious. Lysara froze. She recognized the first voice instantly. Torin, Kale's chief of security, a man who enjoyed his work too much. The manifest is scrubbed? Torin asked. Clean as a whistle, a second voice replied. It was smooth, bureaucratic. Lysara recognized the cadence of the senator's aide she had seen earlier at the gala. We are listing it as high-density ore and machinery salvage. And the noise? Torin asked. The cargo creates noise. They are sedated. If any of them wake up, the gravity dampeners will keep them too heavy to move, let alone scream. We have the handoff scheduled for the port of Cinders. 300 units. 300? Torin let out a low whistle. That is a heavy load. Kale is taking a risk moving that much livestock on a flagship. Risk implies failure is possible, the aide replied. Kale Draven does not fail. Besides, the Senate needs this labor. The debt salvage laws are just paper. We need bodies for the terraforming projects in the Outer Rim. Bodies that do not ask for wages. Cargo that breathes. Torin muttered. Fine. I will double the guard on the lower decks. Ensure the heavy grav cage is secure. Specimen H1 has been restless. He is properly restrained. He is a monster. But yes, he is chained. The footsteps faded away, leaving Lysara alone in the alcove. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Trafficking. It was not just rumors or political slander. Kyle was moving slaves. He was laundering living, breathing people under the guise of debt collection, selling them into lives that were short, brutal, and silent. She looked at her own hands, manicured and soft. She was no different. She realized with a sickening jolt, she was just a more expensive class of slave. She had been sold for a trade route, packaged in silk, and kept docile with threats instead of chains. Fear washed over her, cold and paralyzing. If she went back to the ballroom now, she could drink the blue nectar and pretend she heard nothing. She could survive. But then she remembered the phrase, cargo that breathes. Rage, hot and sudden, burned through the fear. It was an unfamiliar sensation, sharp and dangerous. Vivi, Lysara whispered, her voice trembling. Yes. Mistress, would you like a breath mint before returning to the gala? Access the lower cargo schematics. Deck. Whatever deck handles heavy salvage. Access denied, Vivi said cheerfully. That is a restricted zone. Safety protocols prohibit. Override code Vane Alpha 0, Lysara snapped, using a code she had glimpsed over Kale's shoulder 3 years ago. A code she had memorized and never dared to use. There was a pause. The AI seemed to hiccup. Code accepted. However, mistress, wandering into industrial zones is highly non-optimal for your gown. The grease stains will be catastrophic. Guide me, now, and loop the security cameras in the hallway, if anyone asks. I am in the powder room fixing a hem. This is highly irregular, Vivi complained, though a holographic arrow appeared on the floor of Lysara's heads-up display. I am logging a formal protest regarding the endangerment of high-fashion textiles. Lysara moved. She kicked off her high heels, leaving them in the alcove, and ran barefoot down the cold metal corridor. She tore the heavy skirt of her gown at the thigh to allow her legs to move freely, the ripping sound loud in the silence. She descended. The gilded horizon was a tiered society. The top was gold and glass, the middle was quarters and kitchens, the bottom was a mechanical hellscape. The air grew hotter, thicker. The smell of expensive perfume was replaced by the acrid tang of sweat, rust, and unwashed bodies. Lysara ducked behind a stack of crates as a patrol drone buzzed past. She was trembling, her breath coming in short gasps, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had to know. She had to see the truth of the man she slept beside. She reached the heavy cargo bay. It was a cavernous space, lit by harsh sodium floodlights that washed everything in a sickly yellow hue. And there, arranged in rows like inventory, were the pens. They were durasteel cages stacked 3 high. Inside were people, beings of a dozen species huddled together in rags, their eyes dull with the lethargy of sedation. But in the center of the room, separated from the others, stood a singular isolation unit. It was a heavy gravity cage. The air inside shimmered, dense and crushing. Lysara crept closer, hiding in the shadows of a hydraulic lift. She peered into the containment field. Inside, a man was on his knees. He was human, but he was unlike any human Lysara had ever seen in the history vids. He was massive, his muscles corded and tense, fighting against the artificial gravity that tried to flatten him to the deck. He was stripped to the waist, his skin a roadmap of scars, burns, lash marks, jagged lines of old violence. A heavy collar was locked around his neck, pulsing with a faint red light. This was specimen H1. He was not sedated. He was shaking with the effort of simply holding his head up. Sweat dripped from his nose to the floor. Lysara stepped out from behind the lift. She could not stop herself. The cruelty of it, the sheer mechanical brutality of crushing a living thing just to keep it still, broke something in her chest. She approached the force field. The man's head snapped up. His eyes were dark, burning with a feral intensity. He looked at her, at the silver dress, the jewels, the alien perfection of her face, and his lip curled. "Come to watch," he rasped. His voice was like grinding stones, rough with disuse and pain. Lysara stopped, her hands hovering near the control panel. "No," she whispered. She looked around. There was a water dispenser for the guards near the station. She grabbed a canister, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. She approached the field service port. "You look thirsty," she said, the inadequacy of the words making her flinch. The man stared at her. He didn't move. The gravity was pinning him, but his stillness felt like a choice. "I am not a pet, lady," he growled. "I do not do tricks for water." "It is not a trick," Lysara said. She keyed the port open. The heavy gravity did not extend beyond the barrier, but she could feel the heat radiating from him. She placed the canister inside the reach of the field. He looked at the water, then back at her. He shifted, his muscles bunching as he fought the invisible weight to reach out. He grabbed the canister, crushing the metal slightly in his grip, and drank. He drained it in 3 seconds and threw the empty canister aside. He wiped his mouth with the back of a scarred hand. He looked at her, really looked at her, his gaze stripping away the gown and the title. "You smell like flowers," he said. "It is perfume," she said foolishly. He laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. "You smell like flowers and lies. Go away, golden girl. This place stinks of metal and blood. You will stain your pretty shoes." "I left my shoes upstairs," Lysara said, a spark of defiance lighting in her chest. The man blinked, surprised. His gaze dropped to her bare feet, dirty from the deck plating. Before he could speak, the ship lurched. A siren screamed, a tearing sound that vibrated through the hull. The lights flickered and died, replaced by rotating red emergency strobes. "Vivi, what is happening?" Lysara shouted over the din. "Sabotage in Sector 7, Vivi replied, sounding panicked. "A gravity coil has ruptured. Containment fields are fluctuating. Mistress, you must evacuate." The hum of the heavy gravity cage stuttered. The field flickered. Above the cages, a massive Durasteel support beam groaned. The gravity surge had twisted the metal. It sheared off its rivets and began to fall, straight toward a group of workers who were scrambling in the dark, trying to secure the other cages. They were going to be crushed. "No!" Lysara screamed, but she was too far away. The man in the cage moved. With the gravity dampener failing, he exploded into motion. He didn't run away. He lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the falling beam just as it came down. The sound of impact was sickening, flesh against steel. The human roared, a primal sound that shook the deck plates. His knees buckled, but he did not fall. He held the beam, tons of metal groaning against his back, his muscles straining to the tearing point. "Move!" he bellowed at the workers. "Move or die!" The workers scrambled away, terrified and confused. The human held the weight for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, veins bulging in his neck, blood trickling from his nose. Then, with a final explosive shove, he threw the beam to the side, where it crashed harmlessly into the bulkhead. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The emergency lights stabilized. The gravity field hummed back to life, slamming him down against the deck again. Lysara stood frozen. She had expected a monster. She had seen a savior. Guards came running in, weapons drawn. They did not help him. They pointed shock lances at his heaving chest. "He is loose," one guard shouted. "He saved them," Lysara cried out, stepping forward. The guards ignored her. Torin strode into the room, his face grim. "He is too volatile," Torin said coldly. The gravity surge weakened the containment. "If he breaks out, he will tear this ship apart. Reset him." The guard nodded and reached for a control panel on the wall. Resetting memory, wiping higher cognitive functions. "He will be a husk, sir." "Better a husk than a loose weapon," Torin said. "Do it." "No." The word was soft, but it cut through the noise. Lysara stepped between the guard and the control panel. She stood tall, summoning every ounce of the imperious noblewoman she was supposed to be. "You will not touch him." Torin blinked, recognizing her. "Lady Lysara? What are you doing here? You should be at the gala." "I said you will not touch him," Lysara said, her voice steady though her insides were water. "He saved your crew. And you want to erase his mind?" "He is property, my lady," Torin said, his voice dropping to a patronizing soothe. "He is dangerous. Please, step aside. Kale would be displeased to see you here." "Kale is not here," Lysara snapped. "I am." She turned to the control panel. She didn't know the codes for a reset, but she knew how to break things. She had watched the engineers work on the climate systems. "Vivi, overload the localized circuit for the containment collar." "Mistress," Vivi protested, "that constitutes destruction of consortium assets." Do it, or I will pour champagne into your central processor, executing voltage spike. Vivi sighed. Sparks showered from the panel, then inside the cage. The human arched his back as his collar sparked and died. The red light faded. The pain channel was gone. Torin surged forward, grabbing Lysara's arm. You foolish girl, do you know what you have done? He shoved her aside, rougher than he intended. Lysara stumbled, hitting the wall. A low growl vibrated through the room. It didn't come from a machine. The human stood up. Without the collar's suppression and without the heavy gravity, he rose to his full height. He was terrifying. He looked at Torin, then at Lysara, huddled against the wall. He moved faster than thought. He crossed the distance and backhanded Torin, sending the security chief flying across the room into a stack of crates. The other guards hesitated, fear checking their trigger fingers. The human turned to Lysara. He loomed over her, a mountain of scarred muscle and rage. She looked up at him, expecting death. He reached out. His hand, large enough to crush her skull, hovered near her face. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were calloused, but his touch was shockingly gentle. Why? He asked. Lysara looked into his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a beast. They were the eyes of a man who had forgotten what kindness looked like. Because I am tired of cages, she whispered, even the pretty ones. The alarm klaxons blared louder. More guards were coming. We have to go, Lysara said, adrenaline sharpening her mind. Now. She grabbed his hand. It engulfed hers. Where? He asked. There is nowhere to run on a ship. Golden Girl. I know the ship, she said. I know where the eyes aren't. She pulled him toward the service hatch. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, suspicion warring with instinct. Then, his fingers tightened around hers. It wasn't a capture. It was an anchor. Led the way, he said. They ran. Getting a man the size of a blast door through the service tunnels was a nightmare of physics. Lysara guided him through the narrow, steaming corridors that ran like veins behind the luxury suites. They climbed maintenance ladders, squeezed between heat exchangers, and ducked under high-voltage conduits. They stopped in a sealed climate control maintenance corridor, situated directly behind the mirrored wall of her own private dressing room. It was a narrow space, insulated and quiet, humming with the soft vibration of the environmental system. There was barely room to stand. Lysara was pressed against the wall, and Jace, she remembered the file name, Jace Arlen, was pressed against her to avoid the thermal coils. The proximity was suffocating and electric. She could feel the heat radiating from his bare chest. She could smell the sweat and the ozone on him. His breath stirred the hair on her forehead. He was looking down at her, his expression unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The adrenaline of the escape was fading, leaving behind a stark, terrifying reality. She had committed treason. She had stolen her husband's most valuable asset. She was trapped in a box with a man who could snap her neck with one hand. But she wasn't afraid of him. You are insane, Jace whispered. His voice was lower now, intimate in the cramped space. Do you know what he will do to you if he finds us? He won't find us, Lysara said, though her voice shook. Vivi has looped the sensors here to the system. This room is empty. Jace looked at the wall, the back of the one-way mirror. Through a gap in the insulation, he could see into her room, the silk sheets, the gold fixtures, the cage she lived in. He looked back at her. He saw the dirt on her face, the torn dress, the bare, bleeding feet. You are bleeding, he said. It is nothing. He shifted his weight, trying to give her space, but there was none. His knee brushed her thigh. The contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. It was a hunger she hadn't realized she was starving for. Just logistics, she told herself. Just logistics. Jace looked at her hands, still clutching the fabric of his ruined trousers for balance. "You freed me," he said, sounding like he was trying to solve a complex equation. "You didn't just open the door. You turned off the pain." "I told you," Lysara breathed, looking up at his mouth, then quickly to his eyes. "I decided not to be complicit." His gaze softened. It was a subtle shift, like ice cracking. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lysara." "Lysara," he tested the word. It sounded rough and sacred in his voice. "I am Jace, I know." They stood there in the dark, breaths mingling, the silence heavy with things that could not be said. 2 decks up, in the pristine, polished corridors of the crew quarters. The whispers had already begun. It started with a nervous technician who had seen a flash of silver and a shadow of muscle disappearing into a vent. It traveled to the mess hall, then to the bridge crew, and finally, inevitably, into the encryption logs of the ship's AI. Vivi processed the data streams. The probability of catastrophic social fallout was increasing exponentially. Vivi flagged a new entry in the ship's daily log, hidden deep within the subroutines. Rumor propagation, 89% saturation. Content. The alien shipowner caught his wife with the strongest human slave. No one expected his reaction. Vivi paused the logic thread, then added a single, private annotation. Probability of scandal. Rising. The routine became a lifeline. A fragile thread spun between the velvet-lined coffin of the upper decks and the steel-ribbed belly of the ship where Jace waited. For 3 days. Lysara Vane lived 2 lives. In the first, she was the ornament Kael Draven expected her to be. She attended morning briefings, pouring tea for admirals who looked at her as if she were a piece of furniture. She stood by Kael's side during video conferences with the Senate, nodding at the appropriate times, her face a mask of serene disinterest. She wore the jewels, the silks, and the suffocating perfume that Kael favored, acting the part of the trophy wife so flawlessly that even Torin, the paranoid chief of security, stopped tracking her eye movements. In the second life, she was a thief. The moment the lights in the master suite dimmed for the night cycle, simulating a gentle planetary dusk, Lysara would move. She did not sleep. Sleep was a luxury for the safe. Instead, she gathered the contraband she had squirreled away during the day. Nutrient paste packets stolen from the emergency kits in the life pods. A regenerative medical gel siphoned from the bathroom dispenser into a perfume flask. A pair of mechanic's coveralls she had lifted from a laundry chute, heavy and smelling of industrial detergent. It was madness. It was treason. And it made her feel more alive than she had in 5 years. "Mistress," the artificial intelligence Vivi whispered in her ear as Lysara crept down the service ladder on the 4th night. "I must once again protest the inadvisability of hiding a muscular contraband mammal in a luxury suite's maintenance crawlspace. The ventilation shafts are not designed for that level of testosterone." "Be quiet, Vivi," Lysara whispered back, gripping the cold rungs of the ladder. "Are the sensors looped?" "Sensors are looping," Vivi replied, sounding resigned. "I have routed the camera feed for Sector 4 Alpha to display empty corridor footage from 2 weeks ago. I am logging this under narrative interest. If we are all executed, I hope the biographers appreciate my creative direction. You are an accomplice now, Vivi. There is no going back. I am an etiquette program with a hacking hobby," Vivi corrected. "It is a very confusing existence." Lysara dropped from the ladder, landing softly on the grate of the maintenance deck. She moved through the shadows, her heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Every creak of the ship sounded like a footstep. Every hiss of steam sounded like a breath. She reached the climate panel and tapped the sequence she had memorized. The panel slid aside. Jace was waiting. He was sitting with his back against the insulated wall, his long legs stretched out in the cramped space. He looked better than he had 3 days ago. The medical gel had closed the worst of the lacerations on his chest, leaving fresh pink scars against his tanned skin. The swelling in his face had gone down, revealing the sharp, geometric angles of his jaw and cheekbones. He didn't jump when she entered. He simply opened his eyes. He had known she was coming long before she opened the door. "You are late," he said. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating in the small space. "Kyle had a late meeting," Lysara murmured, sliding into the crawl space and pulling the panel shut behind her. The darkness enclosed them, lit only by the faint blue strip of the emergency LEDs. She handed him the bundle of clothes and the food. "Real food?" Jace asked, tearing open a nutrient pack. "High-density protein," Lysara said. "It tastes like chalk, but it will help you rebuild." Jace ate with a focused, terrifying efficiency. He didn't eat like a glutton. He ate like an engine taking on fuel. When he was finished, he wiped his mouth and looked at the coveralls she had brought. "Gray," he noted, holding them up. "A good color for disappearing." "Put them on," she said. "If we have to move, you cannot be running around bare-chested. You are too conspicuous." Jace looked at her, a glint of amusement in his dark eyes. "Conspicuous," he repeated. "Is that the noble word for it?" He stood up as best he could in the low ceiling, pulling the coveralls on. The motion highlighted the sheer density of his musculature, the way power coiled beneath his skin like a compressed spring. When he zipped the suit, he looked less like a gladiator and more like a dangerous engineer. He sat back down, closer to her this time. "Tell me about the patrols," he said, the business descending over his face. "They have doubled the guard on the lift decks," Lysara reported, reciting the information she had gleaned by listening to Torin's headset channels. "They are scanning for biosigns in the cargo holds. They think you are still hiding in the lower levels. They do not suspect you went up." "They will," Jace said grimly. "Torin is not a fool. He will realize the cargo bays are empty, and then he will start thinking about who had access to the control codes. He will look at you, Lysara." "Let him look," Lysara said, though a shiver went down her spine. "By the time he figures it out, we will be at the Port of Cinders. I have a plan to get you off the ship." "I don't need a plan to get off," Jace said. "I need a weapon and 3 minutes of distraction." "And then what?" Lysara asked sharply. "You kill 6 guards and take a shuttle? The consortium has long-range trackers. They will burn you out of the sky before you clear the atmosphere." "You are not just a fugitive, Jace. You are a lost investment. Kale does not let investments go." Jace went quiet. He studied her face in the dim light. "You talk like a merchant," he said. "I am a merchant's wife," she replied bitterly. "I know how the ledger works." Jace leaned his head back against the wall. "I was not always an investment," he said quietly. Lysara froze. In 3 days, he had said almost nothing of his life before the cage. "Where are you from?" she asked softly. "A rock called Helios 3, he said. "It was an independent colony, farmers, mostly terraforming engineers. We were drafted into what the consortium called debt relief. They told us our sector owed back taxes for the oxygen scrubbers. And you couldn't pay? We paid," Jace said, his voice hardening. "We paid every credit. but the interest rates adjusted faster than the harvest. Then the ships came. They didn't take money. They took the healthy. They called it labor conscription. He looked at his hands, clenching and unclenching them. I was a shock trooper for the colony defense force, he said. That is why I fetched a high price. They liked their slaves to come pre-trained. They thought discipline would make me obedient. Did it? Jace looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes stole the breath from her lungs. It made me patient, he said. It taught me how to wait for the mistake. The way he said it sent a jolt through her. He was not a broken thing she was nursing back to health. He was a weapon that had decided to sheath itself, waiting for the hand that would wield it, or the moment to strike on its own. Suddenly, Vivi's voice barked in Lysara's ear. Alert! Patrol vector shifting. Security detail approaching the service corridor. Probability of discovery high. Lysara gasped. Hush! Jace hissed. He had heard it too, the heavy thud of magnetic boots on the metal grating outside. They are coming, she whispered. Panic flaring. Jace moved instantly. He grabbed her arm and pulled her deeper into the shadows behind a stack of climate filters. The space was impossibly small. He pressed her back against the wall and crowded in front of her, shielding her body with his own. Silence. He breathed against her ear. The service hatch hissed open. Beam lights swept the corridor, cutting through the gloom. Lysara stopped breathing. She could see the white beams dancing over the pipes and wires through the gap in the filters. Clear the sector, a guard's voice boomed. Torin wants every vent checked. The boots clanked closer. Jace was pressed hard against her. She could feel the slow, steady thrum of his heart against her chest. He was completely still, a statue of tension. His hand rested on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. The proximity was overwhelming. The fear mixed with the adrenaline, creating a cocktail of sensation that made her head spin. She could smell the soap she had given him, mixed with the natural masculine scent of his skin. A beam of light swept over the filters. Lysara squeezed her eyes shut. She felt Jace's body tense, his muscles turning to rock. He was ready to spring, and if the guard took one more step, Jace would kill him. She didn't want him to kill. She didn't want more blood. Please. She prayed silently. Not now. The guard's steps paused. Nothing here. The guard grunted. Just rats and steam. Check the thermal outputs, another voice ordered. Sensors are clear, the first guard said. Moving to the next section. The footsteps retreated. The hatch hissed shut. Lysara let out a breath she had been holding for a lifetime. Her knees buckled, but there was nowhere to fall. Jace was still pressed against her. They stood there for a long moment in the returning dark. The danger had passed, but neither of them moved. The air between them was thick, charged with a sudden, terrifying awareness. Jace's face was inches from hers. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips. His eyes were searching hers, dark and unreadable. The restraint in his body was palpable. He was holding himself back with a physical effort. You are trembling, he murmured. I am not used to this, she stammered. Used to what? He asked. Fear? Or being this close to a man who isn't paying for the privilege? The words were sharp, but his tone was not cruel. It was searching. Lysara looked up at him. I am not used to being seen, she whispered. Jace's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up to her eyes. His hand, the one on the wall, shifted slightly. His fingers brushed a lock of hair away from her temple. The touch was electric, sending shockwaves through her nerves. You are reckless, Lysara, he said softly. You are playing a game you do not understand. Kale will destroy you if he finds out. Let him try, she said, surprised by the fierceness in her own voice. Jace stared at her. and for the first time, the mask of the soldier slipped completely. She saw a flicker of wonder in his expression. He stepped back, breaking the spell. The sudden distance felt cold. "We need to check the route," he said, his voice rough. "If they are checking vents, we need a new path to the shuttle bay." Lizara nodded, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. She felt unmoored, as if the gravity stabilizers had failed again. She cleared her throat, trying to regain some semblance of composure. "I brought a data slate," she said. "I downloaded the schematics for the lower decks." She handed him the device. Jace took it, his large fingers tapping awkwardly on the delicate glass interface. "This is small," he muttered, squinting at the holographic display. "It is standard consortium tech," she said. He grunted, scrolling through the menu. He paused, frowning at a file name. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to a label. "Protocol. Imperial Benevolence?" Lysara peered at it. "Oh, that is the formal greeting for the High Council. I was practicing it for the gala." Jace stared at the text. "Shurkal vesh nikto vor," he read aloud. Lysara blinked. Then, a bubble of laughter rose in her throat and escaped before she could stop it. Jace looked at her, offended. "What? You said, 'I offer my grandmother to the soup.'" Lysara giggled, clapping a hand over her mouth. "It is supposed to be, 'I offer my service to the soul.'" Jace stared at her. Then, slowly, a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face, erasing years of hardness. "Soup is better than service," he reasoned. "At least the soup is honest." Lysara laughed again, a genuine, quiet sound that seemed to brighten the dark corridor. It was the first time she had laughed in years without checking if anyone was watching. "You are terrible at alien languages," she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "And you are terrible at being a proper noblewoman," he countered. "You are sitting on a dirty floor in a 3,000 credit dress, laughing at a slave." "I am not laughing at a slave," she said, her smile fading into something softer. "I am laughing with you." The moment hung between them, warm and fragile. "I checked my contract," Lysara said, the levity vanishing as the reality of her situation returned. "While you were sleeping," Jace lowered the data slate. "What did you find?" "There is a clause, subsection 84. She hugged her knees to her chest. "It says that if I am found to be endangering consortium assets or trade routes, my status as spouse is revoked. I can be legally reassigned to a political detention estate." Jace went very still. "Detention estate," he repeated. "That is a polite word for a hole in the ground where they erase people." "Yes," she whispered. "If Kale finds out, he doesn't have to divorce me. He can just file a form, and I disappear." Jace looked at her, his expression darkening with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "You knew the risks. You knew what he was. Why risk erasure for a stranger?" "Because I was already erased," Lysara cried out, the words tearing out of her. "Look at me, Jace. I am a doll. I am a signature on a contract. I walk where he tells me. I smile when he tells me. I am lonely in a way that feels like vacuum exposure, cold and silent and endless. When I saw you in that cage, when I saw you fight, I realized I was just waiting to die. I decided I would rather burn than fade away." She was crying now, silent tears tracking through the dust on her face. Jace moved. He didn't hesitate this time. He closed the distance between them and knelt before her. He reached out and took her face in his hands. His palms were rough, calloused from years of labor and war, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. He wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "You are not a doll," he said firmly. "You are the bravest thing I have ever seen." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't trust power. Lysera. I don't trust captains or kings or anyone who thinks they own the stars. But I trust you." He pulled back slightly, his eyes locking onto hers. "I won't be another person who uses you," he promised, his voice shaking with the effort of his restraint. "I won't take anything. If this happens, if we happen, it must be chosen, not taken. Do you understand?" Lysara looked at him. She saw the hunger in his eyes, a reflection of her own, but she also saw the iron will holding it back. He was giving her the one thing Kale never had: control. She reached up, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. "I choose," she whispered. She closed the gap. The kiss was not like the stories. It wasn't a graceful fade to black. It was desperate. It was the collision of two people who had been starving for a lifetime. Jace groaned low in his throat, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He tasted of tea and survival. His mouth was hot, demanding, but he let her set the pace. When she pressed closer, he met her. When she hesitated, he waited. It was a cinematic sensation, the heat of the maintenance vents, the smell of danger, the overwhelming relief of finally touching another human being without armor. It was the ache of wanting more, the sharp, terrifying realization that she would burn the whole galaxy down just to feel this again. They broke apart, gasping, their foreheads resting together. Jace ran his hand down her spine, grounding her. "We are going to survive this," he said. "I swear it. We have to," she whispered. The next night, the romance gave way to the mission. Lysara sat at Kyle's personal desk in the master suite. Kale was asleep in the next room, a heavy sleeper aided by the expensive sedatives he took to quiet his ambitious mind. She had stolen his personal data plaque. Her hands shook as she bypassed the biometric lock using a synthetic fingerprint Vivi had 3D printed for her. Access granted. The screen flashed. She didn't look at the financial accounts. She went straight to the shipping manifests, searching for the anomaly she had heard Torin discuss. She found it. Project Cleansing. She scrolled through the files, her horror growing with every line. It wasn't just illegal labor. It was a systematic purge. "The Senate has a program," she whispered to herself. "They are designating independent colonies as unstable species habitats. They are using biological weapons to weaken the populations, then sending in the consortium fleets to rescue the survivors." She swiped to the next page. It was a map, charity convoys. She read. She copied the data onto a microchip and pulled the plaque offline just as Kale shifted in the other room. She slipped back into the maintenance corridor 10 minutes later. "Jace, look at this," she said, thrusting the chip into the data slate. Jace scanned the manifest. His face went pale beneath his tan. "I know these codes," he said, pointing to a string of numbers. "Delta 9 Harvest. That is not a shipping code. That is slang from the slave pits on Nar Shaddaa. It means cull the weak." He scrolled faster. "They are using the charity convoys as cover," he realized. "They go in with food and medicine, identify the dissidents and the strong, and ship them out as debt slaves. The rest, they leave to starve. This isn't just trafficking. Lysara, this is a galaxy-wide laundering scheme, and Kale is the bus driver," Lysara said, feeling sick. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. It was not a gravity surge this time. It was an impact. The floor jumped a foot in the air. Lysara was thrown against Jace, who caught her and braced himself against the wall. Sirens screamed, real ones this time. A deafening wail that signaled hull breach. "Vivi!" Lysara shouted. "Report! Explosion in Sector 1!" Vivi screamed, the AI's voice modulator cracking with simulated terror. External detonation. It was an inspection drone. It blew up directly outside the master suite. "Kale," Lysara gasped. "Target status. Alive," Vivi reported, the blast shields deployed in time. "But the hull is compromised. We are in full lockdown. Blast doors are sealing all decks." Jace looked at the door to the maintenance corridor. "If the blast doors seal, we are trapped in here," he said. The ship shuddered again as the emergency bulkheads slammed into place throughout the vessel. "We are not going anywhere," Lysara said. The intercom crackled to life. It was Kale's voice. He sounded calm, ice-cold, and terrifyingly sober. "This is Captain Draven. We have been attacked by a rogue element. Security protocols are in effect. No one leaves their quarters." There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than the gravity. "Navigation," Kyle continued. "Set a new course. We are diverting to Station Ophiuchus. We will operate under neutrality protocols until this investigation is complete." Jace looked at Lysara. "Ophiuchus?" he asked. "It is a neutral station," Lysara said, her eyes wide. "It is a hub for diplomacy and black market trade." "It is a trap," Jace said. "He knows someone on board betrayed him. He is taking us to neutral ground to flush out the rat. He is taking us to a place where he can kill without Senate oversight," Lysara corrected. She looked at Jace. "We have a ticking clock," she said. "Once we dock at Ophiuchus, he will tear this ship apart room by room. We cannot hide in the walls anymore." "Then we stop hiding," Jace said, his jaw setting. "We have the manifest. We have the proof. When we get to that station, we don't run. We attack." Lysara looked at the man she had saved, the man who had just kissed her with a tenderness that defied his world. "We attack," she agreed. The Gilded Horizon turned its massive bow away from the trade route, burning hard toward the neutral zone. Inside the walls, the thief and the slave prepared for war. Station Ophiuchus did not orbit a planet. It orbited money. It was a massive, sprawling construct of spun glass spires and rotating habitats, tethered together by gravity beams and political corruption. It sat in the neutral zone between the Tri-Consortium and the independent worlds, a glittering demilitarized zone where enemies met to drink expensive wine and whisper about war. The Gilded Horizon docked at the station's high-altitude spire, a berth reserved for the kind of wealth that could buy solar systems. Lysara stood at the viewport of the master suite, watching the station rotate beneath them. It looked like a jewel, but she knew it was a tumor. It was here that the deals were made, the flesh trades, the weapon smuggling, the Senate bribes. Kale was already gone. He had departed 20 minutes ago, flanked by Torin and a phalanx of guards, heading for a private summit with the Trade Federation. He had kissed Lysara on the cheek, his lips cold, and told her to enjoy the station's amenities but to stay within the secure perimeter. The moment the airlock cycled shut behind him, the suite exploded into activity. "We have 2 hours, Lysara said, stripping off her ceremonial sash, maybe 3 if the negotiations are slow. "Vivi, what is the status of the service corridors?" The AI's voice chimed from the wall speakers, sounding harried. "Current status is chaotic. Mistress, security protocols on the station are shifting every 10 minutes. It is as if the central computer is having a mood swing, or someone is manually overriding the checkpoints." "Someone knows we are here," Jace said. He stepped out of the maintenance closet, the gray coveralls tight across his shoulders. He moved with a restless energy, checking the charge on a stolen stun baton Lysara had swiped from a guard's locker. Not us specifically, Lysara corrected, pulling on a pair of practical magnetic boots she had hidden under the bed. They know Kale is here. The station is on high alert because of the assassination attempt. That makes it harder to move, Jace grunted. That makes it harder to be seen, Lysara countered. Everyone is looking for an assassin drone or a strike team. They are not looking for a wife and a mechanic. Vivi, the disguises. The wall panel slid open, revealing the fabricator's latest creation. I must object to the aesthetic choices forced upon me by circumstance, Vivi said. I have synthesized 2 outfits based on the station's current demographic analysis. For you, mistress, a mid-level guild administrator's tunic, boring, beige, and invisible. Lysara grabbed the tunic. It was perfect, drab and official. And for the gentle giant? Jace looked at the fabricator. Hanging there was a billowing, deep purple robe with a heavy hood and intricate gold threading. What is that? Jace asked, staring at it with suspicion. It is the ceremonial vestment of the Order of the Silent Void, Vivi explained. They are a monastic sect of silence-keeping pilgrims currently holding a convention on Deck 12. It is the only garment voluminous enough to conceal your, let us call it, excessive structural integrity. You want me to dress like a monk? Jace asked, his eyebrow twitching. I want you to hide your shoulders. Jace, Lysara said, suppressing a smile as she tossed him the robe. Put it on. Jace pulled the heavy fabric over his head. It swallowed his armor and his muscles, turning him into a looming purple shape. He pulled the hood up, shadowing his face. He took a step, and the robe swished dramatically. Vivi made a noise that sounded like a digital sigh. The robe works, the AI critiqued. However, the walk is problematic. You are moving with the predatory cadence of a shock trooper scanning for targets. Pilgrims of the Silent Void are supposed to shuffle humbly. You have a distinctly non-compliant swagger. I do not swagger, Jace growled from inside the hood. You are doing it right now, Vivi noted. Try to look less like you are about to punch a hole in the hull. We do not have time for acting lessons. Lysara cut in. Vivi, loop the corridor feeds. We are going to the vault. The vault was a rumor that Lysara had bought from a drunk information broker 3 years ago. It was an off-the-books data haven buried deep in the station's engineering sector. A place where the consortium stored the files they didn't want the Senate to see. If the shipping manifests for the slave trade existed, they would be there. They moved through the service tunnels of the station. The air here was stale, recycled too many times, smelling of ozone and fried food from the promenades above. Jace took the lead, his purple robes billowing as he moved with silent, deadly grace. Lysara followed, checking the biometric scanner on her wrist. Hold, Jace whispered, throwing a hand back to stop her. He pressed himself against the wall as a patrol of station enforcers marched past the intersection ahead. These weren't Kale's men. They wore the blue and gold armor of the station authority. They are checking IDs, Lysara whispered. Jace waited until the boots faded. The pattern is wrong, he murmured. They are not patrolling sectors. They are collapsing a perimeter. They are herding people toward the central hub. Like they are clearing a path, Lysara realized, or closing a trap. They pressed on, descending deeper into the station's bowels. The luxury faded, replaced by bare metal and exposed conduits. They reached the coordinates of the vault. It wasn't a grand door. It was a rusted hatch behind a waste recycling unit, marked with a warning sign for radiation. Standard camouflage, Jace noted. No one checks the radiation leaks. Lysara knelt by the control pad. She pulled a slender decryption spike from her sleeve, a piece of jewelry she had modified herself, and jammed it into the port. Vivi, I need a brute force decryption on the lock. Accessing. Vivi chirped in her ear. By the way, mistress, Kale's heart rate monitor just spiked. He is either very angry or doing cardio. I assume the former. Hurry, Lysara hissed. The light on the hatch turned green. The heavy door groaned and slid open. Inside, the room was lined with server banks, humming with a low blue light. It was cool and sterile. Lysara moved to the main terminal. She didn't need to hack this one. She had Kale's stolen administrative codes. She typed them in. Welcome, Administrator Draven. Search for debt conversion, Lysara ordered. The screen filled with data, streams of names, dates, and prices. It was a catalog of misery. Lysara gasped. It is not just hundreds. It is millions. She scrolled through the list. Entire colonies listed as defaulted assets. The families broken up and sold as component labor units. Jace stood behind her, his hood thrown back, his eyes scanning the screen with a terrible intensity. Stop, he said. He pointed to a file. Batch 494, Helios System. Lysara opened the file. A face appeared on the screen. It was younger, cleaner, without the scars, but the eyes were the same. Specimen ID, Jace Arlen. Rank, Captain, Colonial Defense. Status, liquidation. Jace stared at his own ghost. They sold my unit, he said, his voice void of emotion. They listed us as heavy machinery. He reached out and tapped a subfolder. Transfer list. My sister, he said softly. Ilara. She was a medic. The screen refreshed. Ilara Arlen. Status, terminated. Reason, non-compliant. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of Lysara's lungs. Jace did not scream. He did not punch the wall, and he went completely, terrifyingly still. I am sorry, Lysara whispered, reaching for his hand. Don't, Jace said. The word was a blade. He looked at the screen, his jaw set so hard she thought his teeth might shatter. Copy it, he said. Copy all of it. Every name, every sale. Lysara plugged in the data chip. As the download bar crawled across the screen, a red warning light flashed on the console. Alert! Unauthorized access detected. Trace initiated. They found us, Lysara said, her heart leaping into her throat. Who? Jace asked, turning to the door. Not Kale, Lysara said, reading the code. The Senate. This is a Senate trace. They are watching this vault. The door to the server room hissed. Run! Jace roared. He grabbed Lysara just as the door blew inward. A concussion grenade detonated in the entryway, filling the air with blinding white smoke and deafening noise. Enforcers poured through the breach, armored figures carrying stun rifles. Jace didn't wait. He charged. He hit the first enforcer like a battering ram. The impact lifted the armored man off his feet and sent him crashing into the two behind him. Jace didn't use the stun baton. He used his hands, grabbing the barrel of a rifle and twisting it until the metal shrieked and snapped. Go! He shouted to Lysara, shoving her toward the rear exit. Lysara scrambled through the back hatch, emerging onto a catwalk that overlooked the station's gravity gardens. The gardens were a marvel of engineering, a massive, hollow sphere filled with genetically sculpted forests. Where the gravity shifted as the station rotated, up was down, and down was sideways. Jace burst out behind her, the door sealing shut with a magnetic lock he had smashed. They are behind us, he yelled. Shots sizzled past them, burning scorch marks into the metal railing. They ran onto the suspension bridge that spanned the gardens. Below them, or above them, depending on the rotation, was a canopy of blue trees. The station's gravity shifted. A warning klaxon blared. Rotation imminent. Secure loose objects. The world tilted. The floor became a wall. The wall became the ceiling. Lysera screamed as she slid sideways, scrabbling for purchase on the smooth metal of the bridge. Jace caught her. He hooked one arm around a support stanchion and the other around her waist, holding them both suspended over a 100-foot drop into the trees. "Hold on," he grunted, the strain corded in his neck. The enforcers appeared at the door. They were struggling too, their magnetic boots clanking as they tried to orient themselves. One of them raised a rifle. Jace looked around. He saw a massive hydroponic irrigation pipe running parallel to the bridge. "Lysara," he shouted over the wind of the rotation. "Can you overload that sensor array?" He nodded toward a cluster of sensors on the bridge support. Lysera didn't ask why. She raised her wrist. Her bracelet was a masterwork of gems, but the central stone was a high-output laser refractor she used for inspecting diamonds. She aimed it at the sensor eye and twisted the bezel. A concentrated beam of pure white light stabbed into the optical lens. The sensor overloaded. Sparks showered down. The bridge's stability field flickered. Jace let go of the stanchion. He kicked off the wall, launching them both into the air. For a second, they were flying. Then, Jace twisted his body, aiming for the canopy of the blue trees below. They crashed through the branches. The leaves were soft, rubbery things that whipped at their faces. Jace took the brunt of the impact, wrapping his body around hers, turning himself into a shield. They tumbled through the foliage, bouncing off limbs, until they hit the mossy ground with a bone-jarring thud. Jace groaned, rolling onto his back. Lysara scrambled up, checking him. "You are hurt." "I am fine," he wheezed. "Just bruised dignity." The enforcers were still up on the bridge, scanning the wrong sector. "Come on," Jace said, forcing himself up. "There is a service access behind the waterfall." They limped through the alien forest, the artificial sunlight dappling the ground. They found the maintenance hatch behind a curtain of falling water and slipped inside. It was a safe room, a small, automated bunker designed for station engineers to ride out solar flares. It was cramped, quiet, and smelled of sterile air. Jace hit the door lock. The heavy bolts slammed home. They were safe. The silence that followed was deafening. Lysera slid down the wall, her legs finally giving out. She sat on the floor, gasping for air, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Jace leaned against the door, his chest heaving. He pulled the ruined purple robe off and threw it into the corner. He was back in the gray coveralls, but they were torn at the shoulder, revealing the dark bruise forming on his skin. He looked at her. His eyes were wild, dilated with adrenaline. "We got it," Lysera whispered, patting the pocket where the data chip lay. "We have the proof." Jace didn't answer. He crossed the small room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was rough, urgent. "No," she said. He reached out, his hands hovering over her arms, checking for injuries without touching her, as if he were afraid he might break her. "You jumped," he said, sounding bewildered. "You actually jumped. You told me to," she said. He looked at her face, smudged with dirt and leaf sap. "You are terrified," he observed. "Yes," she admitted. "But not of the jump?" "No," she whispered. She looked at him. The adrenaline was fading, but it was leaving something else in its wake, a raw, aching clarity. She was in a box with him again. But this time, the world outside wanted them dead. This time, there was no gala to return to. "I am terrified," she said, her voice trembling, "because I do not know what I am doing. I am afraid that I am just trading one form of madness for another. I am afraid that wanting you is just another way of trying to escape my own cage." Jace went still. He looked at her with a depth of understanding that broke her heart. "You think you are using me?" he asked softly. "Like a drug or a weapon?" "I don't know," she cried softly. "I don't know who I am when I am not Kale's wife." Jace moved his hands. He took her hands in his. "Then find out," he said. He leaned forward, bringing his face close to hers. "I am not a guard, Lysara, and I am not a master. I am not taking anything from you. I am asking." He waited. He didn't push. He didn't pull. He simply existed in the space before her, a wall of warmth and strength, offering her the one thing she had never had, a choice. Lysara looked at him. She saw the scars that mapped his history of pain. She saw the kindness he had preserved despite it. She saw a man who could crush steel but was trembling because he was terrified of frightening her. She realized then that freedom wasn't a place. It was this. It was the moment before the touch. She released his hands and reached up. She placed her palms on his face, feeling the rough stubble of his jaw. "I choose this," she whispered. "I choose you." She pulled him down. This time, the kiss was not desperate. It was slow. It was a question and an answer. Jace made a low sound, a surrender, and wrapped his arms around her. He pulled her into him, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He felt solid and real, an anchor in the spinning world. There was no frantic tearing of clothes. It was the intimacy of skin against skin, the feeling of his weight grounding her, the way his hands moved over her back as if he were memorizing the shape of her spine. It was the forbidden sweetness of being seen, not as an asset, not as a beauty, but as a person who was trembling and brave and alive. They lay together on the narrow floor of the safe room, the world outside forgotten for a span of heartbeats. Later, as the station's rotation cycle hummed in the walls, Lysara sat up. She reached for the data chip she had fought for. "We need to see what else is on here," she said, her voice steady now. She plugged the chip into her portable scanner, the files projected onto the wall. She scrolled past the slave lists, looking for the political data. She found a folder marked Coop Logistics. She opened it. "Here it is," she said. "The Senate plan. They are going to frame the independent worlds for a terror attack on the homeworld. That gives them the excuse to launch the cleansing fleet." She scanned the list of suppliers, weapons provided by... She stopped. "What?" Jace asked, leaning over her shoulder. "Dravon Logistics," she read. Her stomach turned over. "Kyle is supplying the weapons for the coup," she whispered. "He isn't just a bystander. He is a partner. He is helping them burn the galaxy." She felt a cold sickness spread through her. She had known he was ruthless. She hadn't known he was a monster. Jace looked closer at the projection. "Wait," he said. "Look at the metadata." He pointed to a string of code at the bottom of the file. "That is an encryption tag," he said. "User, KD Obsidian. That is Kale's personal tag." Lysara said. "He didn't just receive these files," Jace said. "He annotated them." Lysara tapped the tag. A hidden text box opened. It was a note, written in Kale's sharp, angular handwriting. "Evidence secured. Senate leverage absolute. Let them build the fleet. Once they launch, I will transmit the proof of their treason. The Senate falls. The consortium rises. I will own the ashes." Lysara stared at the words. He isn't working for them, she realized, horrified. He is letting them destroy themselves. He is going to let the war happen. Let millions die, just so he can blackmail the survivors. "He is playing both sides," Jace said, his voice hard. "We have to stop him," Lysara said. "We cannot let him hold this evidence. We have to broadcast it." The comms unit in her pocket buzzed. It was a text message from Kale. Meet me at the Skylark Lounge. We need to discuss loyalty. Come alone. He knows, Lysara whispered. Jace stood up, his face hardening into the mask of the soldier. You are not going, he said. I have to, Lysara said, standing up. If I don't show, he will lock down the station. We will never get off. I am coming with you, Jace said. No, you will be killed on sight. I will be your shadow, Jace said. I will wear the damn robe. But I am not letting you walk into that room alone. The Skylark Lounge was a place of dark velvet and expensive shadows. Kyle sat at a corner booth, nursing a glass of amber liquid. He looked perfectly at ease, but his eyes were scanning the room with the precision of a targeting laser. Lysara walked in. She had cleaned the dirt from her face and smoothed her tunic, but she still looked pale. Kyle stood up as she approached. Lysara, he said. His voice was warm, but it didn't reach his eyes. You look disheveled. Did the Gravity Gardens disagree with you? I went for a walk, she lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. I got lost. Lost, Kale repeated. A dangerous habit. He gestured for her to sit. There are rumors. Lysara, he said softly. Rumors of a disturbance in the engineering sector. A break-in at the data vault. Is that so? She asked, gripping her hands under the table. Yes. It seems someone stole property that belongs to the Senate. And to me. He leaned forward. I would hate to think that my wife was involved in theft. It would be complicated. I am your wife. Kyle, she said, meeting his gaze. I am not a thief. Kale studied her face. He was looking for the lie. He was looking for the tremble. Good, he said finally. Because I have decided to cut the trip short. We are returning to the ship. Now. Now? Yes. I have a feeling the air on this station is becoming unhealthy. He stood up and offered her his arm. It was not a request. Lysara took it. They walked out of the lounge. In the shadows of the corridor, a tall figure in a purple robe watched them go, then fell into step behind them, silent and unseen. They returned to the gilded horizon. The ship felt different now, not like a home, but like the belly of a beast. Kyle escorted her to the master suite. Wait here, he said. I need to secure the bridge for departure. He left, the door locking behind him. The moment he was gone, Lysara ran to the service panel. Jace! The panel slid open. Jace spilled out, stripping off the robe. We have to move, he said. He is going to launch. If we are on board when this ship jumps to hyperspace, we are dead. We need to get to the hangar, Lysara said. The smuggler's skiff is there. She turned to grab the data chip from the desk where she had hidden it. The door to the suite whooshed open. It wasn't supposed to open. Kyle was supposed to be on the bridge. Kale stood in the doorway. He wasn't looking at the bridge monitors on his data slate. He was looking at the room. He saw Lysara, her hand frozen halfway to the desk. He saw Jace, standing in the center of the room, the gray coveralls unmistakable, the stun baton in his hand. The silence that descended was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb in the split second before detonation. Kyle didn't shout. He didn't call for the guards. He stepped into the room and the door slid shut behind him. He looked at Jace, the slave he had bought for heavy lifting. Then he looked at Lysara, the wife he had bought for legitimacy. He saw the way they stood, not as mistress and servant, but as partners. He saw the way Jace stepped in front of her, shielding her. The alien shipowner looked at his wife and the strongest human slave. Well, Kale said, his voice terrifyingly soft. I suppose we should skip the denial phase. The silence in the master suite was not empty. It was heavy, pressing against the eardrums with the weight of a hull breach. Kyle Draven stood by the closed door, his hand resting on the biolock panel. He did not look like a man who had just discovered his wife with another man. He looked like an auditor who had found a rounding error in a ledger. Calm, precise, and utterly terrifying. Jace stood between Lysara and her husband. The stun baton in his hand hummed, a low, angry buzz that seemed to be the only sound in the universe. His muscles were coiled, ready to spring. He knew the odds. He had a baton. Kale had a ship full of armed mercenaries and a panic button that could vent this room into space in 3 seconds. Jace did not care. He would buy Lysara 3 seconds. Lysara stepped out from behind Jace. Her face was pale, but her chin was high. She would not hide. Not anymore. Kyle walked into the room. He bypassed the wet bar, bypassed the lounge chair, and stopped 3 paces from them. He looked at Jace's gray coveralls, torn at the shoulder. He looked at Lysara's flushed skin and the defiance in her eyes. He did not shout. He did not draw a weapon. He simply tilted his head, studying them with a detached, clinical curiosity. "Did he choose you?" Kyle asked, his voice soft, landing in the room like a razor blade. "Or did you choose him?" Lysara felt Jace tense, ready to answer with violence. She placed a hand on Jace's arm, silencing him. "I chose him," she said. Her voice did not shake. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at her hand on the slave's arm. "And the theft?" Kale asked. "The data vault? Was that also a choice?" "Yes," Lysara said. The door behind Kale hissed open. Tauren burst in, flanked by 4 armored guards. Their rifles were raised, the laser sights dancing across Jace's chest. "Target acquired!" Tauren shouted, his voice thick with the anticipation of violence. "Sir, step away. We will neutralize the threat." Jace raised the baton. This was it. The end. "Stand down," Kale said. He didn't yell it. He said it with the boredom of a man ordering tea. Tauren froze. "Sir, the subject is armed. He is a rogue asset. Standard protocol is—" "I said stand down." "Tauren," Kale repeated, turning to face his security chief. His violet eyes were cold enough to freeze oxygen. "Get out." "But—" "Out," Kale pointed to the corridor. "And take the hall sentries with you. I will handle this matter personally." Tauren looked at the armed slave, then at the shipowner. The order made no sense. It violated every security doctrine in the manual. But Kale Draven was not a man you questioned if you wanted to keep your rank or your head. Tauren lowered his rifle. "Clear the room," he barked at his squad. The guards retreated. Tauren cast one last hateful look at Jace before the door slid shut, sealing them in again. Kyle turned back to the pair. He tapped the bracelet on his wrist. "Vivi," Kale said, "initiate protocol blackout. Cut all internal sensors in the master suite. Loop the audio feed to play a heated domestic argument from the database. Protocol blackout engaged." Vivi's voice chirped, sounding relieved. "Playing Argument Delta, the burned roast. Privacy mode active." Kyle walked to the wet bar and poured a glass of blue nectar. He took a sip, then gestured to the stunned pair. "You can put the baton down." "Jace," Kale said, "if I wanted you dead, the floor you are standing on would be electrified right now." Jace did not lower the weapon. "Why?" Jace growled. "You caught us. You should be calling the executioner." "Because execution is messy," Kyle said, turning to face them. "And because you two have inadvertently solved a problem I have been working on for 5 years. He set the glass down. The mask of the charming socialite dropped away completely. In its place was something harder, sharper, the face of a man who had built an empire in a tank of sharks. You think I married you for your beauty? Lysara? Kale asked. Lysara blinked, thrown off balance by the shift in tone. You married me for my bloodline, she said. For the trade routes my father controlled. Kale laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Your father was bankrupt, Lysara. His trade routes were worthless. I bought them to keep the creditors from selling his estate for scrap. Lysara stared at him. What? I married you because I needed a shield, Kyle said. He began to pace, his movements predatory. The Senate has been watching me for a decade. They know I am the only one with the logistics network to challenge their monopoly. They wanted to nationalize my fleet. I needed to appear harmless. I needed to be the domestic doting husband, distracted by gala planning and marital bliss. You were my camouflage, Lysara. You made me look like a man settled, not a man plotting a war. He looked at Jace. And you? Kale continued. You are the strongest human specimen on the market. I did not buy you for the gladiator pits. I bought you because the Senate's cleansing initiative is building a super soldier program, and I wanted to make sure they didn't get their hands on the best genetic template. Jace lowered the baton, his brow furrowed in confusion. You are lying. Jace spat. I saw the manifests. You are shipping slaves for them. You are their partner. I am their logistics provider, Kyle corrected. There is a difference. If I refuse, they will just hire another guild, one that does not keep detailed records of every crime. By doing it myself, I control the flow. I know where every ship goes. I know every bribe. He tapped the data slate on the desk, the one Lysara had stolen. You found my annotations, didn't you? Lysara, you saw the evidence I have been gathering. Lysara nodded slowly. I saw it, but you were just sitting on it. You were letting people die while you collected files. Kale's face hardened. I was waiting for the kill shot, he said. The Senate is a hydra. If you cut off one head, if I leak one manifest, they will deny it, scapegoat a junior admiral, and continue. To stop them, I need to burn the whole structure down at once. I need to expose the money, the bioweapons, and the political coup in a single broadcast. So do it, Jace said. You have the data. I have the data. Kale agreed, but I did not have the distraction. He walked over to the window, looking out at the stars streaking past in the warp tunnel. If I release this data now, the Senate will claim it is a fabrication by a rival corporation. They will spin it as corporate espionage. I need a narrative that dominates the news cycle so completely that they cannot control the spin. I need a scandal. He turned back to them, his eyes gleaming. A scandal like the most powerful shipowner in the galaxy being betrayed by his trophy wife and his prize slave. Lysara felt a chill run down her spine. You want to use us, she whispered. I want to weaponize you, Kale corrected. He walked closer, ignoring the tension radiating off Jace. Here is the play, Kale said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The crew already knows something happened. The rumors are flying. We lean into it. I will declare that you two have stolen a shuttle and fled. I will put a bounty on your heads that will make every mercenary in the sector drool. And then? Jace asked. And then you run. Kale said. You take the evidence to the archive moon. It is the only broadcast node the Senate cannot jam. While the entire galaxy is watching the manhunt for the lovers who betrayed Kale Dravon, you will upload the files. The Senate will be too busy watching the soap opera to notice the knife at their throat until it is too late. Jace stared at him. You are willing to destroy your own reputation? You will be the laughingstock of the consortium. The cuckolded husband, Kale smiled. a thin, sharp expression. Let them laugh. When the dust settles, the Senate will be in chains, and I will own the shipping contracts for the new government. Reputation is temporary. Power is permanent. Jace shook his head. I don't trust you, he said. You are still a slaver. You are still the man who put a collar on my neck. I expected that, Cale said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black remote. Jace flinched instinctively. Now Cale tossed the remote to Jace. Jace caught it. He looked at it. It was the master control for the slave containment system. Enter code 00 Alpha, Cale said. Jace looked at Cale, then at the remote. His thumb hovered over the keypad. He punched in the code. A soft chime sounded from the metal band around his neck. The magnetic lock disengaged with a click. The collar fell open. Jace stood frozen. He reached up, his hand touching the bare skin of his throat. He had worn that collar for 3 years. The absence of it felt like a phantom limb. The system is updated, Cale said. Legally, Jace Arlen is dead. You are a ghost. No one owns a ghost. Jace let the collar drop to the floor. It clattered loudly on the expensive carpet. He looked at Cale. The hatred was still there, but the edges of it had blurred into something more complex. This doesn't make us friends, Jace said. No, Cale agreed. It makes us co-conspirators, which is far more reliable. Vivi's voice interrupted the tense silence. I must say, this villain redemption arc is unexpectedly wholesome. Although, my probability algorithms are currently screaming. Also, the crew is expecting a public execution. If no one dies in the next 10 minutes, they are going to be very disappointed. We need to stage the escape, Cale said, checking his chronometer. We have a scheduled hull integrity drill in 15 minutes. The alarms will be deafening. It is the perfect cover. He walked to the large, ornate tapestry hanging on the far wall. He pulled it aside, revealing a hidden bulkhead door. Where does that go? Lysara asked. Smuggler's hold, Cale said. Did you really think I kept my best assets in the public cargo bay? This leads to a secondary hangar. I have a stealth skiff prepped and fueled. He opened the door. A blast of cold, stale air hit them. Lysara hesitated. She looked at Cale. Why didn't you tell me, she asked. All these years. You let me think I was alone. Because you were safer being ignorant, Cale said. His voice softened, just for a moment. And because I didn't think you had it in you to fight. He looked at her torn tunic, her dirty face, and the fierce light in her eyes. I underestimated you, Lysara. It was my biggest mistake. Lysara straightened her spine. It was your only mistake, she said. The ship's klaxons began to blare, a rhythmic, ear-splitting hooting. Drill initiated, Vivi announced. All personnel to emergency stations. Chaos is now authorized. Move, Kyle ordered. They entered the hidden passage. It was narrow, lined with conduits and smelling of grease. Cale took the lead, moving with a familiarity that proved he had spent more time in the walls than in the ballroom. They descended 3 levels to a small, hidden hangar bay. It was barely large enough to hold the ship inside, a sleek, matte black skiff that looked like a shard of obsidian. It is a Void Runner class, Cale explained, patting the hull. Minimal heat signature, radar absorbent. It is the fastest thing in the sector. He turned to them. The reality of the departure hit the room. We have a problem with the narrative, Kyle said. What problem? Jace asked, checking the skiff's hatch. To make this work, the galaxy has to believe the lie, Cale said. Lysara, you cannot look like a hero. You have to look like a broken woman who was seduced by a monster. And you, Jace, you have to be the monster. Jace stiffened. What do you mean? When the footage leaks, Cale said, his eyes hard, it has to look like a kidnapping. Or at least, a coercion. If it looks like a mutual alliance, the Senate will suspect a political plot. If it looks like a primal, violent abduction, they will dismiss it as a crime of passion. He looked at Lysara. You have to play the victim. Lysara, one last time. You have to let the galaxy think you are weak so that we can destroy them. Lysara felt a surge of nausea. She had spent years trying to escape the role of the victim. Now, to win her freedom, she had to wear it like a costume. She looked at Jace. He was looking at her, his face twisted in disgust. Not at her, but at the situation. I won't do it, Jace said. I won't let them think I took her. It is just a story. Jace, Cale snapped. It is camouflage. It is a lie that strips her of her agency. Jace argued. It is a lie that saves her life. Cale shouted back, his composure finally cracking. Do you want to be right or do you want her to survive? The two men stared at each other, the shipowner and the slave, bound by a strange, hateful respect. Lysara stepped between them. I will do it, she said quietly. Lysara, Jace started. No, listen to me. She turned to Jace, placing her hands on his chest. It does not matter what they think. It does not matter what the news feeds say. We know the truth. She looked into his dark eyes. I know I chose you. You know you chose me. That is the only truth that matters. Let them have their story. We will have the future. Jace looked at her, his jaw working. He hated it. He hated every second of it, but he nodded. Fine, he rasped. We play the role. Cale exhaled, a sharp sound of relief. Good. Here are the coordinates for the archive moon. He handed Jace a data spike. The Senate has hunters in the sector, and they are closing in. You have a 2-hour head start before they pick up your trail. Don't waste it. Jace took the spike. He ushered Lysara into the skiff. He paused at the hatch and looked back at Cale. If we survive this, Jace said, I am never working for you again. If you survive this, Cale said, adjusting his cuffs, you will be able to buy your own fleet. Go. Jace climbed in. The hatch hissed shut. Cale stood alone in the dark hangar. He walked over to the release lever. He didn't use the automated system. He wanted to do it himself. He pulled the lever. The floor beneath the skiff opened, revealing the swirling, starry void of hyperspace. The black ship dropped. It fell into the dark, silent and invisible. Cale watched it go until it was just a speck against the nebula. Then he turned around and walked back toward the lift. He tapped his earpiece. Vivi, end the drill. Drill ended. Vivi confirmed. And Vivi? Yes, sir. Open a ship-wide channel and sound the distress alarm. Distress alarm? Vivi asked, sounding delighted. Are we acting now? Yes, Cale said. He reached up and tore his own collar, ripping the expensive fabric. He ruffled his hair, destroying his perfect composure. He clawed at his own face, leaving a red mark on his cheek. Showtime, he whispered. Inside the skiff, the silence was absolute. The cockpit was small, lit only by the soft blue glow of the navigation console. Jace sat in the pilot's seat, his large hands moving deftly over the controls. He was in his element now, not a prisoner, but a pilot. Lysara sat in the co-pilot seat. She watched the stars streak by. We are clear of the perimeter, Jace said, engaging stealth drive. The hum of the engines dropped to a whisper. Lysara let out a breath she felt she had been holding since the gala. We made it, she whispered. Jace turned to look at her. In the blue light, the bruises on his face looked like shadows. We are not safe yet, he said. The archive moon is deep in the Badlands. And we have to get past the automated defenses. I am not worried about the defenses, Lysara said. She reached out across the console and took his hand. I am just glad to be out of the cage. Jace looked at their joined hands. You know what this means, he said quietly. Once we broadcast that data, there is no going back. We are fugitives. Forever. No money, no title, no home. Lysara looked at the man who had held up a collapsing ceiling to save strangers. She looked at the man who had refused to touch her until she asked, Freedom isn't safe. Jace, she said. She thought about the lesson she had learned in the last 4 days. She had thought freedom was just the absence of walls. Now she knew it was something heavier. It was the weight of consequence. It was the terrifying, beautiful ability to make a mistake that was entirely your own. Freedom is deciding what you will risk your soul for, she said. Jace squeezed her hand. Then let's go risk it, he said. He pushed the throttle forward. The black ship surged into the void, a tiny spark of rebellion burning against the infinite dark. Behind them, the gilded horizon faded away, a golden cage left empty. Ahead of them, the hunters were already gathering. The archive moon of Mnemosyne 4 was not a place designed for the living. It was a graveyard of information, a frozen world where the canyons were carved from black ice, and the mountains were hollowed-out server spires left behind by a civilization that had vanished 10,000 years ago. The air was thin and bit at the lungs like broken glass. The gravity was a prank played by a bored god, shifting, rolling, and occasionally vanishing altogether. Jace banked the stealth skiff hard to the left, fighting the yoke as a sudden gravity pocket tried to slam them into a canyon wall. The engines whined, a high-pitched protest against the atmospheric turbulence. Set us down there, Lysara said, pointing to a flat plateau of obsidian near the base of the largest spire. The energy signature matches the coordinates Kale gave us. Jace grunted, wrestling the controls. I am trying, he said through gritted teeth. But this moon does not want company. He slammed the landing thrusters. The skiff skidded across the black ice, throwing up a spray of frozen crystals, before coming to a shuddering halt. The silence that followed was instant and oppressive. Lysara unbuckled her harness. She checked the thermal lining of her tunic. We have to move fast, she said. The environmental suit seals are only good for 2 hours in this cold. She tapped her wrist bracelet. Vivi, are you with us? The gemstone on her wrist flickered with a soft blue light. I am currently occupying 70% of your bracelet's processing power and 30% of the skiff's toaster circuit. Vivi's voice chirped, though it sounded thinner than usual without the massive processors of the gilded horizon. It is very cramped in here. I feel like a genie in a thimble. Just keep the encryption keys ready, Lysara said. They cycled the airlock and stepped out onto the ice. The cold hit them like a physical blow. Above them, the sky was a bruised purple, dominated by the swirling nebula of the Badlands. They trekked toward the entrance of the spire. It was a massive doorway carved directly into the rock, covered in glowing glyphs that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. Jace walked up to the door. He looked at the seam where the 2 massive stone slabs met. He placed his hands on the surface and pushed. His muscles bunched under his thermal jacket, but the stone did not budge. It is sealed, he said. He stepped back and unholstered the heavy plasma cutter he had scavenged from the skiff's emergency kit. Stand back, he said. I am going to make a door. Wait, Vivi shouted from Lysara's wrist. Do not cut the door. That is narrative blasphemy. Jace paused, the cutter humming in his hand. It is a rock, Jace said. It is a psychosomatic barrier lock, Vivi corrected. It requires a verbal key. The ancients who built this place valued lyrical symmetry. You have to recite a poem that resonates with the frequency of the glyphs. A poem, Jace repeated, his voice flat. You want me to read poetry to a rock while Senate hunters are tracking us? It is the only way to open it without triggering the defense turrets, Vivi insisted. Jace stared at the door. He looked like he wanted to punch it. I don't know any poems, he growled. Lysara stepped forward. She looked at the glyphs. She didn't read the ancient language, but she recognized the pattern of the tones Vivi was projecting on her heads-up display. She cleared her throat. She adopted the same posture she used when addressing the High Council, straight back, chin raised, voice projecting with formal authority. "Oh, great emptiness of the void," she recited dramatically, spreading her arms. "Your silence is a heavy blanket. We bring you the laundry of the soul. Starch it well, for the galaxy is wrinkled." Jace looked at her, his jaw dropping slightly. The glyphs flashed green. A deep, grinding sound vibrated through the ice. The massive stone doors slid open. Jace stared at the open path, then back at Lysara. "The laundry of the soul," he asked. "It was a translation of a dry cleaning receipt I found in Kale's jacket once," Lysara said, deadpan. Apparently, the ancients had low standards for literature. She walked past him into the dark. Jace shook his head, holstered the cutter, and followed. The interior of the spire was a cathedral of technology. Walls of amber crystal stretched up into the darkness, filled with suspended data shards. But it wasn't empty. As they moved deeper into the central nave, shadows detached themselves from the server banks. Dozens of figures emerged. They wore mismatched armor, scavenged from a dozen different fleets. Some were human, some were alien, but they all had the same look, the hard, hollowed-out stare of people who had survived the worst the galaxy had to offer. They raised weapons. "Halt!" a voice echoed. A woman stepped forward. She was human, gray-haired, with a cybernetic eye that whirred softly. She held a kinetic rifle pointed directly at Lysara's chest. "You are far from home, Lady Vane," the woman said. Her voice was pure venom. "And you brought a pet." Jace stepped in front of Lysara, his hands empty but his stance lethal. "I am no one's pet," he said calmly. "And we are not here to fight. We have data. We know who you are," the woman spat. "You are the wife of the devil. And we don't make deals with devils. We make deals with anyone who hates the chains," a new voice said. The sound of footsteps echoed from the darkness behind the rebels. Kale Draven walked into the light. He looked different. The pristine suit was gone, replaced by a dark tactical flight suit. He looked tired, his face drawn, but his presence still commanded the room. He had arrived. The rebels shifted their aim instantly. Every gun in the room pointed at Kyle. "You have some nerve coming here." "Draven," the gray-haired woman said, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I have an interceptor parked on the south ridge and the encryption keys to the Senate's deepest vaults," Kyle said, raising his hands slowly. "I thought you might be interested." The woman laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Interested? I am interested in seeing your blood on the floor. Do you know who I am?" Kale looked at her. He studied her face, then the cybernetic eye. "You are Alara Vance," he said softly. "Transport 494. You were a navigator before the debt collectors took your ship." "You remember," Alara said, surprised. "I remember every ship," Kale said. "I signed the order." The silence in the room was suffocating. Jace watched Kale, waiting for the spin, the lie, the justification. But Kale didn't spin. He reached into his holster. The rebels flinched. Kale pulled out his own sidearm, flipped it around, and held it out, handle first, toward the woman. "You have every right," Kale said. "It is fully charged. The safety is off." Ilara stared at the gun. Her hand shook. "You think I won't?" she hissed. "I think you should," Kale said. "I am a profiteer. I am a monster. I built a throne on your backs." He took a step closer, pressing the handle into her hand. "But if you shoot me, the encryption keys die with me, the Senate wins, the cleansing continues." He looked her in the eye. "So you have to decide, Captain Vance. Do you want vengeance, or do you want victory?" Ilara gripped the gun. She raised it, aiming at Kale's forehead. Kale didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply waited. Lysara held her breath. Jace tensed, ready to move. But he knew he couldn't stop it. Ilara screamed, a sound of pure frustration, and slammed the pistol into Kale's face. The metal cracked against his cheekbone. Kale staggered back, blood welling on his skin, but he stayed standing. Ilara threw the gun to the floor. "Get to the console," she snarled. "If this data is fake, I will kill you slow." Kale wiped the blood from his cheek. "Thank you, Captain," he said. He walked past her to the central terminal. Jace watched him go, a strange, reluctant respect warring with his hatred. The data mining began. Kyle plugged the stolen drive into the ancient console. The amber crystals around them lit up, pulsing with light as the information transferred. The files opened. It was worse than they had imagined. The conspiracy wasn't just a coup, it was a restructuring of life itself. "Here," Kyle said, pointing to a schematic, the stability purge. "They aren't just seizing the independent worlds. They are planning to reclassify 90% of the population as Stage 2 labor. That means stripping them of citizenship," Lysara whispered. "It means slavery," Jace said. "Legalized, galaxy-wide slavery." "And here," Kale said, opening another file. "This is the Shipping Guild's contribution. Debt collateral. They have been taking out loans in the names of colonists without their knowledge, then seizing their bodies when the payments default. It is a laundering scheme. They turn people into currency." But the worst was yet to come. "Vivi, decrypt the biotech folder," Kale ordered. "Processing," Vivi said from Lysara's wrist. "Warning, the content of this folder is, biologically distressing." A video file opened. It showed a laboratory. A human subject was strapped to a chair. A doctor injected a blue serum into his neck. The subject's eyes went blank. He stopped struggling. "Pheromone compliance," Kale explained, his voice grim. "They developed a viral agent that targets the aggression centers of the brain. It makes the subject docile, suggestible, happy to serve." "They tested it on humans first," Jace said, his voice shaking with rage. "That is why they wanted us. We were the lab rats." Lysara felt sick. She leaned against the console, her eyes scanning the scrolling text next to the video. Then she saw her own name. Subject, Vane, Lysara, genetic profile Beta 9. She froze. "Open that file," she whispered. Kyle hesitated. "Lysara, you don't need to—" "Open it!" she screamed. Kyle tapped the command. The file expanded. It wasn't a medical record. It was a product specification. Project, Silent Spouse. Objective, to engineer a genetic predisposition for agreeableness and loyalty in high-value noble bloodlines. Target, marriage contracts for consortium leadership. Lysara read the words. Engineered predisposition, obedience compatibility. She stepped back, her hands trembling. "It wasn't just the contract," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It wasn't just the training or the etiquette classes. They made me this way." She looked at her hands. "My whole life. My fear." My inability to fight back. It was all written in my code. I am not a person. I am a product. I am a toy designed to stay in the box. She felt the walls of the spire closing in. The shame was a physical weight, crushing her. She wasn't brave. She was just a defective product that had accidentally malfunctioned. Lysara. Jace's voice cut through the noise in her head. He didn't grab her. He didn't shake her. He stepped into her line of sight and stood there, solid and immovable. "Look at me," he said. "I can't," she sobbed, turning away. "I am not real, Jace. I am just a biological script." "Is the script telling you to run into a black ice canyon?" Jace asked softly. "Is the script telling you to break into a vault? Is the script telling you to love a slave?" He reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder, waiting for her permission. She nodded, a tiny jerky motion. He placed his hands on her shoulders. They were warm, heavy, grounding. "They can write whatever code they want," Jace said, his eyes fierce. "They can engineer the fear. But they cannot engineer the choice. You chose to fight. You chose to save me. No product does that." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "You are the most real thing in this galaxy, Lysara Vane, and I want you free, even if it costs me everything, even if I have to burn this whole moon to do it." Lysara took a breath. She felt the warmth of his hands. She felt the anger inside her, not the engineered obedience, but the raw, hot rage of a woman who had been violated. She looked up. Her eyes were dry now. "Burn it," she whispered. "Burn it all. Boom!" The explosion rocked the spire. Dust and crystal shards rained down from the ceiling. "Proximity alert," Vivi screamed. "We have company. Senate Elite Guard. 3 gunships inbound. They found us," Kale said, pulling the data drive. "We have the master ledger. We need to move." They ran. The Senate hunters didn't wait to land. They breached the spire's upper levels, rappelling down on grav lines, firing plasma rifles as they descended. "Action stations," Ilara Vance shouted. "Defend the exit." The rebels returned fire, their kinetic rounds sparking against the sleek white armor of the Senate elites. "We can't go back to the skiff," Jace shouted over the roar of combat. "They will blow it on the tarmac. There is a secondary hangar on the upper level," Kale yelled, firing his pistol at a descending trooper. "My interceptor is there. It can hold 3. "What about the rebels?" Lysara cried, ducking as a laser bolt singed the wall next to her head. "They know the terrain," Ilara shouted, popping up from behind a crate to fire a volley. "Go! Get the data to the tribunal. We will hold them here. Go!" Jace grabbed Lysara and pulled her toward the gravity lift. Kale followed, covering their rear. They shot up the central shaft. The gravity shifted halfway up. Suddenly, they were falling sideways. "Adjust!" Jace roared. He grabbed a railing as the world tilted 90 degrees. He swung himself up, which was now down, and reached for Lysara. She was sliding toward a drop that fell into the endless dark of the spire's core. She reached out, their fingers locked. Jace pulled her up with a grunt of effort, swinging her onto the walkway. Kyle landed beside them, sliding on the smooth floor. "Keep moving," Kyle shouted. They sprinted through the upper galleries. The ancient servers hummed around them, oblivious to the war. Ahead of them, a squad of elites blocked the corridor. Jace didn't slow down. He didn't have a weapon, but he had momentum. He hit the squad like a freight train. He shoulder-checked the point man, sending him flying into the others. He grabbed the second trooper by the helmet and slammed him into the wall. It wasn't the brute force of a gladiator. It was the controlled violence of a soldier protecting his unit. Lysara didn't just watch. She saw a control panel on the wall. "Vivi, seal the blast doors behind us. On it." She tapped her bracelet against the panel. The heavy blast doors slammed shut, cutting off the reinforcements pursuing them. They reached the upper hangar. Kale's interceptor sat there, a sleek silver dart of a ship. Kale scrambled into the cockpit. Jace and Lysara jumped into the jump seats behind him. "Strap in!" Kale shouted, firing the engines. The hangar doors blew open. A Senate gunship hovered outside, its cannons spinning up. "Hold on," Kale muttered. He didn't fly away, he flew at them. The interceptor surged forward. Kale spiraled the ship, spinning through the gap between the gunship and the hangar wall. The gunship's tracking couldn't keep up. They burst out into the black sky. "Get us to hyperspace!" Jace yelled. "I can't!" Kale shouted back. "The Senate has a blockade net. They are jamming the navigation computer when we need a clean vector." Suddenly, the comms panel lit up. "Attention! Unverified vessel. This is the Free Coalition cruiser Broken Chain. Power down your engines or be destroyed." A massive ship dropped out of stealth directly in front of them. It wasn't Senate. It was Rebel. "It is Ilara's backup," Lysara said, relieved. "No," Kale said, his face paling. "Look at the signature. That isn't Ilara's faction. That is the Radical Wing. They don't take prisoners." The radio crackled again. "We know you have Kale Draven on board. Hand him over and we will let the rest of you go. We want the slaver." Jace looked at Kale. "They want you," Jace said. Kale looked at the blockade of Senate ships behind them and the rebel cruiser in front of them. "If we stop." "The Senate catches us," Kale said. "If we fight the rebels, we die." He tapped the comms. "This is Kale Draven," he said. "I am transmitting a data packet." "Don't," Lysara said. "If you give them the master ledger, they might destroy it just to spite the Senate." "I am not sending the master ledger," Kale said. He tapped a sequence of keys. "File sent. Draven personal accounts, level Omega." "What did you do?" Jace asked. "I just sent them the keys to my entire financial empire," Kale said calmly. "Every bank account, every hidden asset, every deed to every ship I own." He looked back at Jace and Lysara. "I just gave away my leverage. I am bankrupt. If they leak that, I am ruined." "Why?" Lysara asked. "Because money is replaceable," Kale said. "You two are not." The radio crackled. The rebel voice sounded stunned. "Data received. Confirmed. These are Draven's personal keys. The man just bought his own funeral. Let them pass." The rebel cruiser shifted, opening a gap in the blockade. "Punch it," Jace yelled. Kale slammed the throttle. The interceptor shot through the gap, accelerating toward the jump point. Behind them, the Senate ships opened fire on the rebel cruiser. The sky lit up with plasma. "We are clear," Kale breathed, engaging the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines of light. They were safe. In the quiet of hyperspace, the adrenaline crashed. Lysara sat in the jump seat, holding the data drive that contained the master ledger. "We have the proof," she said. "But where do we take it?" "We can't take it to the news networks," Kale said, engaging the autopilot. "The Senate owns them. They will cut the feed before the first file uploads. We can't take it to the other corporations," Jace added. "They will just use it to blackmail the Senate for better tax rates. There is only one place," Kyle said. He brought up a map of the core worlds. He pointed to a massive station orbiting the capital planet. "The tribunal node," he said. "It is the Supreme Court of the Consortium," Lysara said. "It is where they adjudicate trade disputes. It is also the only place in the galaxy with a direct hardwired broadcast link to every colony world," Kale said. "By law, tribunal proceedings are broadcast live and unedited. It is an automated system designed to prevent censorship. But the tribunal is controlled by your rivals," Jace said. "And the Senate has guards there." "Yes," Kale said. "It is a fortress." "So how do we get in?" Lysara asked. "We don't sneak in. Kale said. He looked at his two companions, the wife he had underestimated and the slave he had freed. We crash it, he said. He pulled up the schedule. Tomorrow is the grand session. All the high senators will be there, the trade lords, the cameras. We fly this ship right through the front door. Kale said. We storm the chamber, and we upload the data directly into the judge's pulpit. We will never walk out, Jace said quietly. No, Kale agreed. We won't. The moment we upload that data, the Senate guards will open fire. We will be trapped in the chamber. Lysara looked at the drive in her hand. She thought about the obedience file. She thought about the millions of people who were about to be erased. She looked at Jace. Freedom is deciding what you will risk your soul for, she reminded him. Jace took her hand. He squeezed it hard. And your life, he added. He looked at Kale. Set the course, Jace said. Let's go end it. Kale nodded. He typed in the coordinates. Target, Consortium Tribunal. Arrival, 6 hours. He leaned back in the pilot's seat. He looked at his ruined face in the reflection of the console. He was broke. He was a fugitive. He was about to die. He smiled. This is going to be a hell of a show, he whispered. The Consortium Tribunal node was not built for justice. It was built for spectacle. It hung in the upper orbit of the capital world like a judge's gavel suspended in the void. A massive circular station of white marble and transparent aluminum, designed to intimidate any petitioner who dared to approach the High Senate. Today, the grand session was in attendance. 300 senators, guildmasters, and trade lords sat in the gallery, their robes shimmering with expensive fabrics, waiting to adjudicate the fate of planetary economies. They did not expect a heist. The interceptor, Kyle's silver dart of a ship, did not request docking permission. It broadcasted a Priority 1 emergency code reserved for the highest tier of consortium nobility. Vessel ID, The Vengeance. Captain Kale Draven, Intent, Asset Recovery and Criminal Prosecution. Inside the cockpit, Kale adjusted the cuffs of his ruined flight suit. He looked at Jace and Lysara. Remember the script, Kyle said, his voice tight. I am the enraged husband. You are the captured fugitives. If you look like partners, they will shoot us before we clear the airlock. Jace sat in the co-pilot seat. His hands were bound in heavy magnetic cuffs, props from the skiff's brig, unlocked but looking heavy and inescapable. He wore a torn gray tunic that exposed the scars on his chest. I hate this, Jace growled. You are supposed to hate it, Kale said. You are a slave who stole a queen and got caught. Look defeated. I don't know how to look defeated, Jace said. Then look angry, Lysara said. She stood behind them. She had used a medical kit to make her pale skin look even more wan, and she had torn the hem of her tunic. She looked like a woman who had been dragged through hell. Kale stood up. He reached out and grabbed Lysara's arm, hard. I am sorry, he whispered, his eyes flashing with a rare apology. But I have to bruise you. The cameras have to see the grip. Do it, Lysara said, wincing but not pulling away. Make it look real. Kale tightened his grip until his knuckles turned white. He pushed her toward the airlock. Showtime. They swept through the tribunal's docking ring like a storm. Kale didn't stop for customs. He marched through the security checkpoints, dragging Lysara by the arm while Jace stumbled behind them. Two of Kale's loyal security droids, hacked by Vivi and repainted, prodding him with stun lances. Senator Valerius, the head of the cleansing initiative, stood at the entrance to the great chamber flanked by 4 elite guards. He was a corpulent man with skin the color of oiled parchment. Draven! Valerius boomed, holding up a hand. You cannot just barge into a grand session. You are under investigation for, I am here to reclaim my property, Kale shouted, his voice echoing off the marble walls. He shoved Lysara forward so she stumbled to her knees in front of the senator. This woman betrayed her contract, Kale roared, playing to the gathering crowd of cameras. She stole my ship. She stole my slave. And she tried to sell my trade secrets to the rebels. The cameras swiveled. The narrative was irresistible. The humiliated tycoon, the unfaithful wife, the brute slave. Valerius looked at Lysara, then at Jace. He smiled, a greasy, satisfied expression. Well, Valerius said, if she is a traitor, then she falls under tribunal jurisdiction. We will take custody of the prisoners. Over my dead body, Kale snarled, stepping into Valerius's personal space. By the rights of possession, subsection 4. I demand a public hearing. I want the galaxy to see what happens when you cross Kale Draven. Valerius hesitated. He loved a show, but he was cautious. Fine, Valerius said. Bring them in. But be warned, Draven, if you disrupt the proceedings, I will have you executed alongside them. They entered the great chamber. It was a coliseum of politics. The senators sat in floating pods arranged in a massive sphere. In the center was the floor of truth, a platform suspended over a gravity well. Kyle marched them to the center platform. Vivi, Kyle whispered into his collar. Status? I am currently infiltrating the tribunal's broadcast array. Vivi chirped in his earpiece. Their firewall is impressive. It is rude, aggressive, and clearly compensating for something. I need 3 minutes to bypass the censorship protocols. You have 2, Kale muttered. He threw Lysara down on the platform. Jace stood beside her, his head bowed, his muscles tense. The High Judge, a holographic projection of a stern alien face, peered down at them. State your grievance, Kale Draven. My grievance is treason, Kale declared. He pointed at Lysara. This woman attempted to subvert the stability of the consortium. She claims she has evidence of a conspiracy. She claims the Senate is corrupt. A murmur ran through the pods. She is a liar, Kale shouted. She is broken. Tell them. Lysara, tell them what you are. This was the cue. Lysara slowly stood up. She looked small in the center of the massive room, surrounded by the men who owned the universe. She looked at Valerius. She looked at the judge. She activated the microphone on the platform. I am a product, she said, her voice trembling perfectly. She looked at the camera drone hovering near her face. I was designed for obedience, she said. I was engineered to serve the ledger. But there are errors in the ledger. She paused. This was the code. There are errors in the accounts of the Helios system, she said, her voice gaining a strange rhythmic cadence. There are discrepancies in the biological assets of Project Silence. I submit the corrections for review. Vivi, she screamed internally. Now! Correction accepted, Vivi yelled in her ear. Uploading the master ledger. The massive holographic screens that lined the walls of the chamber suddenly flickered. The image of the High Judge vanished. In its place, documents appeared. Thousands of them, shipping manifests, bank transfers, videos of the pheromone labs, the list of silent spouse genetic modifications. The room erupted. Cut the feed, Valerius screamed, standing up in his pod. Kill the broadcast, I can't, a technician shouted from the control booth. It is locked out. The system is rebooting. On the screens, the face of Alara Vance appeared, the video Kale had recorded on the moon. Then the lists of names, senators, guild masters, the very men sitting in the room. You did this, Valerius shrieked, pointing at Kale. You traitor! Kale stood in the center of the chaos, a a smile spreading across his ruined face. "I am just a logistics partner. Senator," Kale called out, "I just delivered the package." "Guards!" Valerius roared. "Execute them! All of them!" The elite guards on the platform surged forward. Jace moved. He snapped the magnetic cuffs. They had never been locked. He grabbed the stun lance from the first guard, reversed it, and slammed the butt into the man's helmet. The guard went down. Jace spun, the lance a blur. He wasn't fighting like a gladiator now. He wasn't playing to the crowd. He was fighting like a soldier, deficient, brutal, fast. He disarmed the second guard, sweeping his legs and tossing the rifle to Kale. Kale caught the rifle and opened fire on the guards approaching from the bridge. Lysara ducked behind the central console, her fingers flying across the controls, trying to keep the platform's shields active. Valerius slammed his hand on a red button in his pod. "If we cannot silence them, we will crush them." A section of the floor opened. Rising from the pit was the champion. It was a monstrosity of bioengineering. A cyborg towering 8 feet tall, with hydraulic claws and skin plated in durasteel. It was the tribunal's executioner, used to settle property dispute. "Kill the slave," Valerius ordered. The champion roared, a sound of grinding gears and synthetic rage, and charged at Jace. Jace didn't run. He dropped the stun lance. It was useless against durasteel. He stood his ground. "Jace!" Lysara screamed. The champion swung a massive claw. Jace ducked under the blow, the wind of it ruffling his hair. He moved inside the creature's guard. He didn't try to punch the armor. He grabbed the hydraulic line running along the creature's elbow. He pulled. With a roar of effort that corded every muscle in his body, Jace tore the line free. Hydraulic fluid sprayed like black blood. The champion's arm went limp. The creature stumbled, confused by the sudden loss of function. Jace didn't stop. He scrambled up the creature's leg, jumping onto its back. He wrapped his arm around the cyborg's neck, not to choke it, but to find the primary interface port at the base of the skull. He jammed his thumb into the port, crushing the delicate sensors. The champion seized up. It shuddered and crashed to the deck, a heap of expensive metal. Jace stood over it. He picked up the creature's heavy cannon, which had fallen loose. He aimed it at Valerius's pod. The room went silent. The senators held their breath. They expected the slave to fire. They expected blood. Jace looked at Valerius. He looked at the weapon in his hand. Then, he threw the cannon down. It clattered loudly on the metal floor. "I am not your dog," Jace said, his voice amplified by the silent room. "And I am not a murderer." He turned his back on the senator. It was the ultimate insult. He had won by discipline, not domination. The broadcast screens were still scrolling. The galaxy was watching. Messages were beginning to scroll at the bottom of the feed, real-time reactions from the colonies. Uprising in Sector 4. Strike declared on Mars. The truth is out. Valerius looked at the screens. He looked at the faces of his colleagues, who were already trying to flee the chamber. He realized it was over. "Protocol Omega," Valerius whispered into his comms. "Burn it all." The station shuddered. Siren wails began to scream. Self-destruct sequence initiated. T-10